Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the ICG committee member responsible for running our webinar programme. So this morning, we're delighted to welcome ICG members Nikki Carrott and Hannah Chalmers. Nikki is the managing director and founder of Sherbet Research, an agency she established in 2003. With over 25 years of experience, Nikki has spent her career focusing on understanding and engaging with children and young people and those within their worlds. Her work covers a wide range of topics.
No.
Could you turn off your mics, please? Could everyone turn off their mics? Thank you. So her work covers a wide range of topics from media, sports and mental health to the effectiveness of ad campaigns and new product launches development in both the UK and internationally. Hannah spent the first half of her working life at two of the world's most powerful and influential cultural organisations, the BBC and Universal Music. After some time abroad, she returned to London, moving agency side, working first as a global insight director at a media agency, before joining Ipsos Mori as a senior director in media and tech. In 2020, she took all this experience and learning to bring together a unique offer that is Culture Studio, where she combines both extensive commercial acumen with an enduring interest in culture and society. In today's webinar, Nikki and Hannah will be revealing some of the most interesting findings from a study they carried out among children and young people in 2023 for Gamble Aware. So they would like to make this as informal as possible. So if you do have any questions as we go along, either type them in the chat box or turn on your webcam and raise your hand so that you can ask your question. So before we begin, here are some more events that we've got lined up for you in the autumn. So you can see there's a lot already in the agenda for the coming months. Don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars and online events. And all you have to do is to reach out to Lucy if you'd like to know more about that. So now I'm going to hand over to Nikki and Hannah.
Hello, everyone. Right, I need to share. Ooh, what happened to the... No, I can't. I can hold on. Now it's not working. This. So where's my... Normally when I go into the share. Sorry.
Hold on. You should be able to.
Yeah, it should be here. Yeah. Sorry. There we go. Everyone see that?
Yep, wonderful. You can just put it on full screen.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I checked it and then I got confused. Hello everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nikki. Hannah is also on screen below. I don't know where underneath. Yeah, there you go. We're both on screen. Thank you all for coming. We're going to take you through a very small part of an incredibly interesting project that Hannah and I worked on last summer. And then there was a report also that was published earlier this year, I think in January or February time, should you want to get more detail, or obviously at the end of this webinar, we will be happy to speak to anyone who wants more. Obviously, it was a massive project. There's lots of information. So this is just a kind of snippet of what we did for Gamble Aware. In brief, there were 3 parts to the project. We did 2 of them. One part was to really sort of build knowledge and understanding on what young children, 7 to 11, so very young, sort of know, think or understand about gambling. That's sort of a very brief sort of look at what we did. It was a very extensive project. Where we talked to young people, but also the other side of it was to talk to affected others, so those that have been affected in some way by gambling. And then there was a section that another agency looked at, where looking at children, young people, vulnerable young people. But we explored perceptions to see sort of how they talk about gambling and what they think about it. We never really necessarily used that word initially. Obviously, they're very young, these kids that we spoke to, but we wanted to see sort of from their perspective and how different their views or thoughts on gambling were compared to those of adults. So what I'm going to actually start off by doing is just almost give you the summary, what is the exact summary of what we found out, and then we will give go into a little bit more detail. Particularly, Hannah's going to take you through some of the really interesting semiotics findings that we did at the very beginning of the project. So taking into this section will be what we're looking at is with the 7 to 11-year-olds. So there's a little bit we'll look at about the affected others, but we're focusing on particularly the young children in this webinar. So gambling is very much a part of everyday life across the UK. It was very clear from the research that we did that, you know, it was easy to talk about. We were very concerned not to use the word, but all but 2, and I think this comes later, all but 2 of the children that we spoke to knew the word. It's very much a part of sort of everyday culture within the UK. And sort of it's children under 11 included the affected others who have been affected in some way by gambling, learn about it through their interactions, you know, the everyday interactions in the media, most likely YouTube and such, but in their family life, you know, the lottery or watching things with out and about with their families. It's kind of it is everywhere. And when they're very little, so sort of at this sort of below secondary school, for most of those that we spoke to, and I'll come on to the methodology actually after the exec summary, none of them really spoke about gambling in a negative way at all. It was actually quite exciting. It's actually quite fun, and it sort of kind of brings up sort of, you know, bright and colourful imagery and something that no one really sort of talked about the children in a negative way. So it's not a dirty word. We kind of realize it's just, you know, it's a word that they're very happy and knowledgeable about in some ways. And also we found, because we spoke to parents, that whilst gambling has sort of some of these obviously very negative connotations for adults, but when it comes to parenting and to children under 11, it doesn't really sit alongside those things that parents have conversations with their kids about. So, you know, they don't talk about it in any way like about drinking or about those sort of more openly visual conversations that parents will often have with their kids, even sort of, you know, from around 9 or 10. Unaffected others, that harms, obviously, you know, as unaffected others, the harms that can come with problematic gambling are definitely less overt. Am I doing all right, Hannah? Have we become a little bit? Yeah, good.
Your hand's up though. There's a hand up on
Oh,
your
is there?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Let's come in. Whose hand's up? Where is it? I can't see that, but
Oh.
not coming in? No. If you want to at any point just come in to ask questions, please do.
Yeah, please do.
I think it's your hand, Nikki, because you're waving your hand around as you
Oh,
speak.
you're right.
I have a feeling it picks it up somehow or other.
It does. It is me. I'm not quite sure how to get rid of it. I'll do it in a minute. It's because it's got like if you do that, it makes a heart shape as well. Anyway, so for many parents, and again, this is from lots of research that we've done, not just this, but it's screen time is obviously a very real concern for their children. So we know that that's like obviously, so what they're seeing on screen, particularly when we look at, you know, gambling, there's a lot of visual adverts and things that kids see on a very regular basis. Parents, they don't make a connection between a sort of the compulsive screen time or gambling like activities. Hold on. However, as sorry, this is the one. Hannah, help me a second, everybody. I'm a bit jet lagged.
So I think one of the key findings was actually scrolling on TikTok produces the same effects and was designed and informed by slot machines. But actually, if you don't know that, you wouldn't guess that. And it seems so obvious when we explain it. But yeah, parents weren't making the connection between the sort of compulsive scrolling that you get on YouTube Shorts, and it produces all the same sort of effects of the dopamine hit and wondering what's next as the slot machine. So it's almost like they're learning to gamble through TikTok without actually gambling in inverted commas.
Thank you, Hannah. And those kind of warnings, the warnings about gambling harms, about losing money, about what potentially might happen, just with children under 11 was really not in any way cutting through. It was all about the excitement of the win or getting money. Very few, there were a couple But it was really after 11 or 12 in that secondary school age that they sort of really began to understand the sort of much more negative sides of gambling. But below that, the under 11s was sort of quite more, yeah, they didn't really understand sort of or cut through the things that could happen potentially.
Yeah, and I think that point that gambling, the notion of gambling in young children's minds as being potentially problematic is just completely absent.
Yes. And that's also, I think we'll come on to it, partly because it's not something, whilst it's everywhere, it's not something that they talk about that much yet. And it hasn't been covered at school. It's sort of, so it's all sort of kind of low level fun sort of, you know, lottery or doing sort of, you know, fun things that they might see rather than anything that they've kind of actually been discussed or looked at in a negative way yet.
And then do you want me to talk through the semiotic?
Yes,
here?
thanks,
So we're going to obviously come on to talk about this in more detail, but what was really interesting, the semiotic analysis done by Laura Bowerboom, if any of you are familiar with her, she's not in the ICG, was absolutely outstanding. And what she demonstrated so clearly was that gambling warnings just don't cut through because they're not in the sort of childlike imagery. They don't connect with how young children are understanding or make sense of gambling at this age, whereas gambling advertising looks like children. It almost looks like it's talking to children. So there's lots of use of animation, bright colours, and that connects with them much more effectively than gambling warnings. So one of the key findings is that if you're going to have gambling warnings that are sort of directed at younger children, then it's got to be in much more child-friendly language and it's sort of visual language as well as tonality.
Yeah, and there was things again that we've not written here in detail, Hannah, but about the fact that there's a language barrier of ways to talk about gambling, wasn't it? We came up with at the end. So that the sort of the what was the analogy you used? I remember about oh my God, I've forgotten it now. There was an analogy that there's so much language has kind of developed in other areas to help people talk about things, but when it comes to gambling, it's a really hard area for people to know which language, the right language to use.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that in a
sorry, thank you. Oh, moving on. So I know it's sort of backwards, but just quickly for those that were interested in the way that we carried out the research. So as I said earlier, there was a semiotic and cultural analysis that kind of hold the whole project off to really look at what's going on in the world of semiotics and really closely looking at YouTube and loot boxes and the like, and the areas where obviously these young people are kind of on every day. So after that, we had a bit of a pause and a look because there's so much that came out from that was really important that we covered off then into the qual methodology. So on the left is what we did with the 7 to 11-year-olds. And then on the right is actually how we spoke to the affected others. They ran in parallel. But we basically got them to do a pre-task, all of them. So there were 18 young people under 11. They did a pre-task where we just asked them to kind of keep a media diary, sort of particularly looking at advertising. It was a really difficult task for them, to be honest, because they don't watch much linear television, and we irritated them somewhat by making them watch these adverts. But we were trying to sort of just find out whether, you know, how much advertising was hitting them when they're watching their screens, and how much of it.
That's a great question that's come in from Sally. So Sally asks what a loot box is. And I think, Sally, if you ask any 7 to 11-year-old what a loot box is, they'll tell you. So it's a really interesting generational divide there, because if you're in your 40s and you're not a parent, for example, it's very unlikely that you'll have come across loot boxes. So, Nikki, do you want to describe what loot boxes are?
They are, well, when you're playing, so I mean, the main one, they're in lots of different games, but Fortnite, if you've heard of it. So when you're in the game of Fortnite and you're playing around, you can find these sort of like a treasure box almost, or a way of helping you in the game. Sometimes they're free, sometimes you might have to pay for them, but ultimately they help you to do better and to increase your sort of score, or the way that you're playing to win as such. So they sort of that they are in some ways a form of gambling, because you're helping yourself to do better and to win. So yeah, that they are very much a part of a lot of the gaming things that young people play. And I don't know if they started from Fortnite, but Fortnite's probably one of the most well-known areas where you can get loot boxes. You should have a play. Fortnite, interesting game. So anyway, so we spoke to the kids on Zoom, and the parents were kind of present if they wanted to be, and if they had similar age siblings, or they wanted a sibling with them, we kind of let them choose who they wanted to be with on the call. This was, I guess, at the time when we were pitching for the project, we weren't sure how young children were going to react to us talking about. So we didn't necessarily say let's talk about gambling. It was very much a discussion guide, just looking at their lives and what they're watching and what things come up. And in all of the conversations, we did say to the parent nearby, are we allowed to use the word gambling? And all of but two allowed us to. But it wasn't just a direct conversation. We kind of really packaged it up into sort of talking to them about their lives, and then waited to see how or when gambling came up. We then chose, of those 18 interviews, we chose 5 parents to have a follow-up call to just sort of check a few things out. Hannah did that one, which was really, really interesting, to just sort of find out, how close the parents were to understanding or not understanding what their kids knew. And again, it'll come up in a minute, but like the parents were kind of quite flabbergasted, I don't use that word often, but at how much the kids knew, and how sort of how informed they were about gambling in a way that we hadn't thought would happen.
And also, of course, the research, participating in the research meant that they became more knowledgeable about the risks associated with gambling. So, at the start of the research, they were asked, what do you worry about? What do you feel you need to teach your kids about? And they would say, being out on the street on your own, and stranger danger, and alcohol and drugs, but actually gambling wasn't there. And by the end of the research, they were like, well, for sure, it's really important that we have this conversation. So there's kind of clearly an educative role, particularly since in primary school, kids aren't learning about the problem potentially of trying to win things, and how it can become quite compulsive. Nikki, I don't know if you can see the questions, but another question has come in from Paul saying, were you allowed to record the kids, I assume? And if so, with permission, are you able to share some snippets?
We were allowed to record, but we can't share them. Yeah, one, I think, because it was over a year ago, so chance they mostly been deleted. But no, we didn't. I don't think we even shared them. Like with Gamble Aware, they watched it live. We didn't share. There's a whole other side, because obviously to recruit the young children on the left-hand side of here was relatively straightforward. We won't be able to go into it, but recruiting the affected others was less straightforward. We used guinea pig recruitment, who were fantastic at helping us to find those that have been affected by gambling.
So they were children whose parents or a family member had been gambling, and therefore they had been affected by it. And some of those interviews were actually really tough to lead, weren't they, Nikki?
Yeah, very
children explaining how their dad had been stealing money, how their families had nearly fallen apart. So yeah, it wouldn't have been appropriate to share that video.
So I said we really ensured that the way we spoke to them was very flexible. It was very child-led. Like I said, we didn't mention gambling unless it was brought up or we'd agreed with them. And we enriched the voices of children with, as Hannah will take you through in a minute, a semiotic perspective in the way in which gambling is communicating its meaning and culture. There's a quick look at sort of, again now, and I've said quite a lot of this, so I will flip through if I don't want to repeat myself too much. So it's not a dirty word. It was a really easy discussion. They know what it is, and they surprised their parents quite a lot, as I said. What we did find out, because initially we split it, we had 7 to 11s and then affected others 7 to 25, but it was very clear that the 7 to 11s, whether they were affected others or not, were protected quite a lot, or they were protected completely actually from what was going on. So I remember one particular conversation I had with like a 14-year-old girl whose father had quite seriously been gambling, and she had a younger sibling, I think was 8 or 9, and I well, who wasn't there, but I'd asked if the younger sibling knew about what had gone on, and the and her mum were like, no, we have never told her. But I think they were protected, and it seems that until sort of maybe 11 or 12, if something's happening, it's easy to protect them and for them not to sort of be told about what's going on. Sort of, whilst in adult life we see that the notion of gambling does, as we said, have negative, for the younger sort of the under 11s, it's not dominant. It's all about, and it's actually sort of, we realize it's in some ways for them, it's almost celebrated in culture a bit here. It's like it's brilliant because, you know, when you do a lottery card, you could win, or when you do a competition on the radio, you're going to win money and you're going to get rich really quickly, and it's really good. There was very, very little understanding that actually you might actually lose money. It didn't really come up very much with little ones. They can't make that leap almost, I think, as Hannah said before. There's no association drawn between gambling like mechanics in gaming. So it's only when you kind of mention it or you start talking about it that some of the parents, but not even the children, didn't really make that leap at all. You know, gambling for them, for these younger ones, it's sort of quite fun and it's colourful. I said, and exciting. You know, scratch cards. We'd have one child who sort of noticed someone who'd bought lots and lots of scratch cards, which they sort of spoke to their parent and thought that might be quite a lot of money. But you know, not money to lose, but generally just quite a lot of money to pay for, you know, in some ways. But most of them, if not all of them, knew and were aware of scratch cards. And again, the semiotic analysis confirmed to the degree to which gambling imagery mimics so much of their sort of everyday entertainment or media that they're seeing. And again, Hannah will look at that in a minute. So they were asked as quickly when we looked at that, as I told you about their media diaries, the media consumption was very much YouTube dominated, a little bit of animation for the younger, and obviously gaming. But advertising is very much part. If they can avoid it, of course they will. That's what they want to do. They want to skip, but often they can't. So we asked them to find stuff, and they all, I think the majority at some point in their sort of 3 or 4 days of doing a diary, came across some kind of gambling advertising. Coin Master, Monopoly Go, Foxy Bingo, probably the 3 most memorable or ones that came up. All of which, if you know the other 2, are animated and very sort of childlike in their imagery. And many of which the kids are like, you can see a quote there, they're exciting because I'm going to, maybe if I do it, I'm going to win money. They recognised the National Lottery. We were asked, I think it was a specific question, but just to see, but they all recognised it, and sort of not necessarily something that they were doing, but potentially their parents were doing it, you know, when they're in Tesco's. In fact, one of the little girls I spoke to, she recognised it because when she's in Tesco's with her mum, she goes to the table and she does drawings on the bits of paper. But ultimately, she knew that was a place where you could go and sort of take part to try and win money, and sort of catches their eye. I think I've said all this. I'm going to really very quickly, but you know, the word gambling, they know it. They know about arcades and penny slots. So again, I remember having a conversation with one little boy, I think it was about 7, and I said, you know, word gambling, and his dad went, oh, he won't know. And he went, yeah, that's what we do when we go to the penny slots and the machines, and when we go, you know, at Butlins. And his dad was like, wow. And he goes, I heard you talking about it, Dad. So there's a lot of assumptions, I think, from adults that kids don't sort of listen or know, but actually they obviously pick up way more than parents often think they know. And as I said, the protection. So I think we'll just move on now. So I don't last bit before I move on. Sorry, I can't actually. I can't see this because it's in the way. I can't read what the heck. Oh, sorry. What's the heading saying? 'Cause I
Yeah,
can't
so just some quotes here where we asked the children to explain the word, what gambling was.
Oh, yes, thank
Someone
you.
who didn't know what it was. And they really got it, you know, gambling, losing, but sometimes you do win, from Casey. People who lose their money, who try to get more money. I learned about it at school. I learned that it's quite bad. You have low chances. Me and my son were in a shop and the man in front bought 10 scratch cards at £3 each.
Right.
This is Mum. This is a great quote. And my son whispered to me, wow, that man must be really lucky. And I had to say to my son, that's not the way it works, mate. It made me think.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That was the thing when he thought that he had lots of money to be able to buy so many,
Yeah.
rather than the fact is that he's got lots of money and he's about to blow it all potentially. Okay. Thanks, Hannah. So I think this is the, just sort of sum up before we look at the semiotic stuff really quickly. So discussions kind of really highlighted, it's kind of the tapestry of everyday life for British children. They know what it is, and they've got a very high recognition of the different logos and imagery, and some of them explain the mechanics, often much more than their parents realise, but there's no real sort of clear, some of them sort of know you, to a certain extent you might lose some money, but it's definitely not clear. The exciting, colourful, bright side of things is really what comes up tops for the young people when they talk about it, and they don't really understand those flip side at all of it. And then probably a very nice quote here. Just move me out of the way. Oh, sorry, everybody. I'm not allowed to send
read that out. What would make you want to take part in a competition to win money? So that was one of our questions. And Casey11 says, if it sounded fun, like an activity, bingo, it's exciting waiting for numbers on your phone. So she's definitely done bingo, waiting for the person to call out the numbers. I play with Nana at the caravan, 20p a go. Mum explained that Casey usually walks away with £5 by the end of it. I use the money for sweets.
Brilliant.
She's having a positive experience with they're sort of gateway drugs, these sort of mental introductions into the world of gambling.
Right.
Okay. So just to say, the semiotic analysis was a big report on its own, and these are just the headlines to give you a flavour of it. But if you were interested in hearing more about the semiotics, or actually the older kids, we'd be happy, Nikki, wouldn't we, to talk through that at a later date?
Absolutely, yes.
But just a reminder of why semiotic analysis is important in studies of this nature. So the semiotic analysis identifies, surfaces and explains the meaning of gambling in culture, and how it relates to the types of content that children and young people are engaging in. So the brief to Laura was to focus on the spaces in culture that are particularly relevant for kids and young people. So she looked at gaming, celebrities, sports, TV content, YouTube, and so on, to uncover how brands and media are communicating with the core audience, and then honing in, focusing on the uncharted territory of gambling. So remember, children aren't supposed to see gambling advertising at all. So these digital spaces are difficult to get a handle on. And as Nikki and I know from our work with the Advertising Standards Authority at the moment, you know, digital advertising is a whole different world. You know, the ads that you get served on TikTok sort of meld from content and influencer to, is it an ad or isn't it an ad? So they're difficult to get a handle on, particularly for children, to decipher or discriminate, you know, what's a cartoon, what's targeted at them, what's not. So looking in that space provides really rich context on how children and young people are engaging with gambling and gambling adjacent narratives. And by gambling adjacent, this came through really clearly in the research, is gaming that's very like gambling, you know, and we called it the grey area. Who's to decide what's gambling and what's gaming, when so often they use the same mechanics, same tactics, you know, loot boxes, essentially gambling, but it's apparently gaming. So this is a very sort of broad overview. So we identified 4 cultural expressions of gambling within the worlds of children and young people in the UK. So Treasure Box, the idea, and this was so prevalent, all 4 were actually, but Treasure Box was about leaning into a sense of discovery and adventure, So the unknown, this space excites, you know, very much like unboxing videos, excites and exhilarates children to tap, and it's very addictive as well. You know, not knowing what comes next is addictive, and there's lots of research in this space to show why it's so addictive. Shouldn't use the word addictive actually, because there's what was the word that we should use again? But compulsive.
Yeah.
It's a really strong desire to continue. And it's exhilarating to children, it's exhilarating to old people, but particularly to children, to tap into an innate interest in discovery, exploration, the promise of an unknown reward, prize or quest. And then we've got child's play. This is about encouraging a sense of play. So this space entices children to simply enjoy and get swept away by exciting escapist dreamscapes, so Fortnite, for example, that promise a vibrant animated fantasy world of imagination. And then we saw Be a Man. So, and this is sort of Andrew Tate-like territory. So emphasizing what it is to be a man, and gambling is very much front and center of what it is to be a man in this territory. So it's about masculinity, winning, power, status, and ambition. And young children, 7, 8-year-olds, are really seeing a lot of this content. So it encourages young people and children, girls not so much, to fit into a particular lifestyle that meets the demands of what it is to be a man. And it's very much about winning and cars and success. So quite crude signifiers of what it is to be a man in contemporary culture. And then we've got this one that was much more for girls, and girls are seeing this even you know, from 9, 10-year-olds. So playing into a need for community, this space taps into popular culture and celebrity culture to celebrate, to create a sense of social belonging. Participating, being part of the conversation and rooting for each other is more important than winning. So they were the 4 territories that we saw within gambling and gaming. So the 4 cultural expressions of gambling within the worlds of children and young people in the UK play into different needs, traits and developmental spaces that are not necessarily harmful outside of a gambling context. So Treasure Box, you know, if it's not about gambling, it's about discovery, exploration, adventure, taking a chance. And child's play is what it sounds like. You know, it sounds like CBeebies, joy and fun, imagination, experimentation, sensory stimulation. And then Be Like Me is not, I sort of made it sound wholly negative in the previous slide, but it's not. You know, it's about belonging, identity, participation and fitting in. You know, what are the codes of fitting in as you're growing up? And we know that's a really important developmental stage that all children pass through in the road to adulthood. And then Water Cooler Socials, again, not all negative. It's about togetherness, community, being part of something, and again about identity formation and belonging. Now I've just seen 2 questions.
Got a question here, yeah.
So Andrew Smith has asked, a past colleague of mine now runs gambling awareness and prevention. However, it is clear that this starts way before, and it's worth wondering if, oh yes, that would be lovely. Thank you, Andrew.
And then the other one, I was just writing back, it's to Joe. So talking about social, so fascinating. The gambling adjacent tactics of social media apps that randomize frequency. We didn't look at social media with the 7 to 11s because they're not supposed to be on it. We did look at that. It came up a bit more.
It came up a lot
in the older age groups.
With the older age groups. And they would say, you know, it was clearly problematic for so many young people. So they'd say, oh, I'm really tired in the morning because I just can't stop scrolling.
Yeah.
And then this poor boy who was, what was the game? It was Call of Duty, COD. You know, he kept calling it COD. And I was like, what's COD? And he was like, Call of Duty. I was like, oh, right, Call of Duty. And he was saying, yeah, I'm addicted. Yeah, I don't want to do anything else. I just want to play COD.
And we know from the vulnerable side, because we ended up writing the report with another agency who did that side, but we know that it's particularly bad within the vulnerable side.
For sure. And actually what you could see so clearly, and I'm sure all of us parents can relate to this, so much emphasis is on, or responsibility is on the parents to manage, you know, how late they're on their screens. And as they get older, that's harder and harder because kids have phones in their pockets. So, you know, it was really clear that, you know, that there was a lot of stuff that was reliant on parents. And if parents were busy, or if they were, you know, single parents, that of course is so much harder. Joe, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thanks for responding to my question. And it sounds, yeah, it's really fascinating. And it must feel, for the client and for you guys, it must feel like, you know, they're pushing a rock up a hill, because they're battling against so many factors. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, they were just against the big bookmakers, for example. They just had to concentrate on those guys. Whereas now they're having to think about so much more. So this is really, really interesting. Thank you.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it was clear from the research that there are so many different ways, you know, and there are lots of gambling companies. I mean, there's millions of them from all over the world, and it's very hard to sort of police them in a social setting. So whilst all vastly different in their approach, the 4 spaces all speak in overly positive ways that negate any negative, harmful, or potentially addictive elements of these behaviours. So across all 4 territories, we see language that is, and it's all about the language, visual and linguistic. So it's optimistic, it's light-hearted and breezy, it's for fun, and there's nothing to lose. The risk is absolutely hidden. So either overtly, they'll say, free bet, and there's a lot of free bets, or covertly, by not mentioning any possible negative results. So communication is geared to respond to harmless narratives of discovery, belonging, or playfulness, erasing what these behaviours might mean within the context of gambling. And remember, this semiotics was done for children and young people. So a lot of the younger children wouldn't have been exposed to what we're talking about here. But by purposefully leaving out any clear demarcation of play versus gambling, the lines between harmful and harmless play are unclear and blurred through omission and the lack of a specific language to address it. So semiotic analysis of the gambling landscape reflects the findings from the fieldwork. Children under 11, and we include affected others in that, only learn that gambling can be harmful through parental explanation, or where it has happened, and I think there are a couple of examples of this, through school discussion, but very rare. Gambling imagery, and more specifically online gambling imagery, but actually Foxy Bingo does a lot of out of home, and it just looks like it's for kids. It's just cartoons, isn't it? Speaks in a visual language that children are used to reading and that stands out to them. It says, for me, and it certainly doesn't feel risky or potentially dangerous. So what we call the flip side of gambling, that we're all aware of as adults, just isn't present, particularly for younger kids, in the visual communications.
Oh, the grey area.
So am I going to do the grey area?
Yeah, I'll jump in if I need to.
So the grey area, what I alluded to it earlier, is really key in this study, and it's about the difference between gaming that's like gambling and gambling. So as seen in both the media and advertising content that children report viewing and consuming, and then further corroborated in the semiotic analysis, gambling and gaming imagery can often look and feel interchangeable. Like you just don't know, I don't know, like you really have to sort of focus to understand whether it's gaming or gambling. What is it? And this is particularly the case in an online context. So gaming and online entertainment is a huge pull. We all know it is, all parents know it is a huge pull for children, even under 11. And, you know, that's the challenge that CBBC or traditional content providers for children have, because they all want to be on YouTube, they all want to be on Fortnite. And where's the space for traditional content? So if we go on to the next slide. Monitoring it and managing it is hard work for parents. I'd say that's an understatement, and completely, you know, in the group that we did with parents, there was a sort of exasperation and a sort of powerlessness. You know, you're fighting against these huge companies who know how to, you know, get people watching for longer and longer. And of course, we've seen in the news yesterday, Instagram has put in finally more checks on how teenagers are using the platform, but it does slightly feel too little too late. Anyway, so some comments from the parents that really underline what a slog it is. My daughter would be on it from morning till night. I think it's a risk if they're just going to stay in the home and just be online. They're not interacting with their friends in real life. I think 100% it's our job as a parent to manage it and, keep on top of it. Certain days they'd be on their iPad for 12 hours if we didn't sort of snap them out of it. So yes, I think they are very addictive. And then on the right, I just don't think it's good physically or mentally. They need to be outside, they need to be exercising, they need the fresh air, they need the variance, I would hate for them to become so obsessed with it that it's what they choose to do. The role in life is just to sit there in front of it, and they're not going out and living a real life as well. I mean, really, it's sort of upsetting to read. And I think as parents, we all sort of connect with that as well. And then my daughter is quite obsessed with her Nintendo Switch. So obsession, addictive, all of these words come up. So gaming and gambling in an online context look and feel interchangeable. I think we've underlined that. They drew parallels between gaming and gambling-like elements in gaming. These parallels were identified in relation, this was unprompted, in relation to winning things or being surprised, loot boxes or pick a door. But because they aren't particularly aware of the flip side of gambling, these younger kids, they don't know that it's bad. They did not see a comparison between that and the flip side of gaming. So the flip side of gaming being not being able to stop even when you want to, or feeling sort of compulsively drawn in. So parents did see a parallel, but only when it was surfaced by us in the research discussion. So doing this research does bring a lot of it, how prevalent gambling is, to your mind. So summing up, do you want to take over, Nikki?
Okay, yeah, just help me if my brain fog comes back. Don't know if I told anyway. So from a child's perspective, there, as we've said all the way through, there is no flip side to gambling. The gambling issues or problems are definitely less overt in culture. And kids, unless they're told about it, but kids do need to be told about it. And we kind of came up summarizing that ultimately they do need to know the flip side in a child-friendly way, which isn't currently happening anywhere, unless something specific happens, and then maybe something at school will be done, but it seems to be the minority. It's kind of gambling in the wider culture is failing to communicate these risks. So most of the children under 11, if not all, kind of feel like it's a really positive, fun kind of thing to do. And gambling, as we said, is not a dirty word, it's something fun. So whilst children, though, do feel the flip sides of gaming, so they're very aware of that. And I'm specifically now remembering a little girl I spoke to who was 7, who told me in quite a lot of detail about how she sold her pets to see these people. I can't remember the game now. I think it was Roblox, but
I think it was Roblox.
Yeah, she was selling a pet, but the person who she sold the pet to wasn't selling the exact one. So then she decided to not sell the exact one. So there's this whole thing going on between them about how to sort of basically,
that trust, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and the language, again, because it was a year ago, the language she used was very kind of adult in some way language that she didn't really understand, but it was all about, yeah, trust and how you how to do things within the world of gaming, right or wrong. But she was incredible. Her mum was absolutely flabbergasted, again, listening into to her. But so they, like, yeah, within the world of gaming, they really sort of get the sort of compulsive and the flip sides. So we kind of came up at the end with there's 2 jobs that really need to be done to sort of help particularly the under 11s. And it was all about, again, communicating in their language or in a visual or tonal way, right, for children, that there are risks associated, that it's not all just sort of, fun and colourful and bright, and you're not going to win money all the time, because some of these risks are also present in gaming as well, or excessive screen time. So they're sort of aware of it within that side, but not aware of the fact, of the link to the gambling side of things. And there's no real language, and again, we go into a lot more detail, but seems to be no real language to be used to help people to understand sort of the risks that are going on or for them. Hannah, you might need to do this one.
Okay, yeah. I don't think Nikki underlined how jet lagged She
Oh,
was.
no, I didn't want to because you told me off.
You've
Yeah,
done
I'm not
really
talking
well,
about this,
Nikki.
I'm sorry.
So communication that ignores the positive side of gambling adjacent behaviour risks being ignored by children and young people. So there's no point, I think this is a really good chart here. You know, the warnings on gambling are fear-inducing and catastrophic. But if you think about what 7 to 11-year-olds understand gambling to be, it just doesn't make sense. So it's got to speak the same language as what the gambling companies are really good at doing in order to connect with different audiences. So tapping into natural and important elements of children and young people's developmental traits and desires, gambling companies succeed in legitimizing these behaviours within a harmful context of gambling. So this results in cautious narratives to feel too harsh and one-dimensional, as it negates any positive connotations with some of the natural behaviours at play, i.e. that it can be fun, like it just can, you know, that's the reality, gambling can be fun. And, you know, when children were talking about, you know, on the Grand National, how the whole family, you know, bet and then watched, and, you know, you can't ignore that. And that's really important. So GambleAware should communicate a shared language around the risks that can exist in gambling or gambling-like behaviours, and that these risks are as much covert, the emotional risks, as, sorry, that should say overt, the emotional, yeah, covert as covert, visible risks. There's an overt and a covert muddled there. So e.g., you know, money loss and so on. So... And that's us. Yeah, sorry, so that, because that's such a cut down version of a very long report, it's I think we got there in the end.
You want to join us and any
Yeah.
questions? Oh, we've got one here, so one new message. Just a comment.
Yeah, I think that was from me. I just
Was.
think I'm so glad that I'm not I haven't got young children at the moment, and mind you, grandchildren maybe in the future, but it sounds like a complete nightmare. Thank you so much, Nikki and Hannah. That was really enlightening. I mean, it's an area that certainly I don't touch on at all, so really eye-opening. There's still some time left if anybody's got any questions. Anybody want to? Joe, you've got your hand up again. Have you still got a question, or is that the one that you asked earlier?
I was just clapping, emoji clapping.
Thanks, Joe.
Well done. Any more questions from anyone? No.
Oh,
hi, Tony.
I'd be interested to know a little bit more about GambleAware. Are they a charity, or where does their money come from to sponsor this sort of research?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and some people know, and it's a difficult answer. And they're very keen. So they are funded by the gambling industry, but they are completely distinct from the gambling industry. And you'll see from the kinds of research that they do, you know, they really don't beat around the bush in terms of highlighting the potential pitfalls and problems around gambling. So they're completely different board of trustees, and completely independent. But
they're not a charity, are they a charity? They're not, though. They're not. No, I don't think so. They're funded.
Not for profit, though, maybe.
They're a not for profit.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Another comment's just come in from Paul Gabara.
Have a look.
Thank you. It brings back some memories of my kids growing up. Now a positive of one from my middle son from playing games. He's now studying gaming at uni. Okay.
Wow. So Paul, I hate to ask. I don't think I want my 15-year-old to know that he can study gaming at uni.
Interesting.
He you know, he can. I mean, my son was like always into the graphic side of it and really getting very heavy into it. And then he, you know, he was doing computer science at school, and so he's gone into uni to do game design. And part of that is he plays a game called what is it? Complicated game. that he's something like in the top 1,000 in Europe.
Wow.
Wow.
And if you see his room, it's like a space age room, but he built his own computer. So all of that, like a puzzle. I mean, I remember when he was growing up, we kept saying to him, get off the computer, get off your
Yeah,
iPad, get
my
off the
life.
computer, get. And then when he said, you know, at the age of 14, he just said, can I build my own computer? And we went,
Oh.
yeah, go for it. So he went online and got the bits that he wanted and said, this is what it is. And so he was doing it to
That's
then,
incredible.
you know, he taught himself to build one, and
Right.
then kept building it much more. I mean, he's got such a powerful one. I mean, every time he's on it, the internet at home just drops dramatically.
I'd love to know what the game is that he's in the top 1,000, if you remember what it is.
It's called Valoran.
Oh, right. Yeah, make a note of that.
It's very interesting to see the fine line between gaming and gambling, and how easy it would be, or how easy it is, to cross over from
Yeah.
one to the other. So
And there's a lot of we did quite a broad-ranging literature review that then informed, you know, discussion guides who we spoke to, and there's a lot of work being done by academics in that space about the way in which they trigger compulsion, repetitive behaviors and I didn't know this. TikTok was developed and informed by slot machine science. So yeah, that's how it was built.
Gosh.
okay, any more questions? Any last minute questions for Hannah and Nikki? No? Okay, well, if not, then just remains to say thank you very much to both of you for talking to us, or taking us through your case study there. It was really interesting and quite eye-opening and rather disturbing in some ways. So thank you to everybody for joining us today. Do log in for one of our future webinars or another online event that we've got so much in the diary for you this autumn.
Thanks, Sally.
Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
afternoon,
Thanks,
everyone.
Sally.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.